Alright, today we're deciding the ultimate fate of one of the most controversial characters in Harry Potter, Severus Snape. Is he getting a ticket to heaven, or is he doomed to burn in hell? You know, Snape is one of those characters who really makes you think. Some people say he's a misunderstood hero, while others believe he was just a bitter bully who happened to do a few good things. But today, we're putting all opinions aside and judging him fairly by looking at his heroic acts, his sins, and whether he redeemed himself in the end. Now, I'm not just going to make a decision based on vibes alone. We actually have a scoring system. It works like this. Good deeds earn Snape positive points. The bigger the deed, the more points he gets. Bad actions add to his sin counter. The worse the act, the more points it racks up. Redemption points come into play if he tried to fix his mistakes or showed genuine change. At the end, we'll compare everything and see where he truly belongs. So, what do you think? Will Snape's good side outweigh his sins? Or is he too far gone to be saved? Let's break it all down and find out. Let's start by looking at everything Snape did right. I know, some of you might be thinking, wait, wasn't Snape a total jerk? And yeah, he was. But that doesn't erase the fact that he pulled off some pretty heroic stuff. We're not just talking about little things like holding the door open for someone. We're talking about actual bravery, sacrifices, and moments where he made a real difference. Here's how it all adds up. These are the small but still good things Snape did. They may not be life-changing, but they count. Helping Harry without him even knowing. Remember in Sorcerer's Stone when Harry's broom was going crazy? Snape was actually the one countering Quirrell's curse to save him, plus 5 points. Teaching defense against the dark arts well. In Half-Blood Prince, he actually taught students real, useful skills, which is more than we can say for some other professors, looking at you, Lockhart, plus 5 points. Warning the Order about Umbridge's trap. It was subtle, but when Harry sent out an SOS in Order of the Phoenix, Snape was the one who tipped off the Order about what was happening, plus 5 points. These are the actions where Snape seriously stepped up, giving Harry the key to defeating Voldemort. Snape's memories revealed how to destroy Voldemort for good. Without that, the battle would have gone very differently, plus 50 points. Helping Dumbledore plan Voldemort's downfall. Snape played a long and dangerous game to ensure Voldemort could be stopped, even if it meant making himself look like the villain, plus 50 points. These are the biggest, most selfless acts Snape ever did. Being a double agent for years, Snape walked a razor-thin line between two worlds, pretending to be Voldemort's loyal follower while secretly feeding information to Dumbledore and protecting Harry. Think about it. One wrong move, one tiny mistake, and he would have been killed instantly. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, we see just how deeply Voldemort trusted him. Snape was the only Death Eater allowed to remain at Hogwarts, and was given important assignments like watching Draco Malfoy. And the scariest part about all of this is that even Voldemort himself wasn't sure about Snape. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, Voldemort says,
"Been a good and faithful servant, Severus, but only I can live forever."
That line alone proves Voldemort never fully trusted Snape, yet Snape still managed to fool him for years. Most people think of spies as slick, confident figures, but Snape's double life was a constant nightmare. He had to lie to the most dangerous wizard in history while also keeping up his cold, emotionless act in front of the Order. The mental and emotional toll must have been unbearable. Living with pain and regret, Snape didn't just mourn Lily's death, he never moved on. He spent his entire life trying to make up for the mistake that led to her murder. Snape could have chosen a different life. He could have walked away, started over, or lived only for himself. Instead, he stayed in Hogwarts, protecting the son of the man he hated, all because Lily would have wanted him to. His grief wasn't just emotional, it shaped his entire life. He wore black robes every day, he never let himself be happy, and he spent every moment of his existence living in the past. In The Prince's Tale, we see that Snape even went to Godric's Hollow after Lily's death and held her lifeless body while sobbing. This scene proves that he never stopped loving her, even when she chose someone else. Dying to help. Harry Snape knew his time was running out. The moment Voldemort figured out that the Elder Wand wasn't working properly, Snape must have realized he was in serious danger. And yet, he never ran. He didn't try to escape or beg for his life. Instead, he stayed close to Voldemort to keep up the illusion of loyalty, knowing full well that Voldemort might kill him at any moment. When Voldemort finally decided Snape needed to die, Snape didn't fight back. He accepted his fate because he had one last job to do: give Harry the truth. Even in his final moments, he was thinking of Lily. His last words to Harry were, "Look at me," because Harry's eyes were the only part of Lily that still existed in the world. Snape could have run, but he didn't. He didn't get a heroic last stand. He didn't get to go down in a blaze of glory. Instead, he died alone, in pain, covered in his own blood, but still making sure Harry got the final piece of the puzzle to defeat Voldemort. So, looking at all this, Snape actually did a lot of good. He didn't just sit back and watch. He actively put himself in danger over and over again. With everything so far, his heroism bar is filling up fast, reaching 365 points. But before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to look at the other side of the coin. Because if we're being honest, Snape wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. So let's talk about his sins. So far, we've seen Snape's heroic moments, but we can't ignore the dark side of his character. Well, we all know that for most of the series, he came off as downright cruel. I mean, just because he did some good things doesn't erase the fact that he spent years bullying students, holding grudges, and making life miserable for certain kids, especially Harry. That means we need to take a step back and examine all the ways he fell short. These are the smaller offenses, but they still count because Snape didn't need to act this way. He just chose to. Bullying his own students. Seriously, Snape acted more like a school bully than a teacher. He constantly mocked, insulted, and embarrassed students, especially Gryffindors. Being unnecessarily harsh on Neville. Snape's treatment of Neville wasn't just strict, it was downright cruel. From the start, he humiliated and belittled him in front of the class, making Neville doubt himself constantly. He even mocked his potion skills, suggesting he'd accidentally kill his pet toad. Neville's biggest fear in the world wasn't Voldemort, wasn't the Death Eaters, it was Snape himself. That says a lot, showing extreme favoritism towards Slytherins. Snape's favoritism towards Slytherins was obvious. He let them get away with almost anything while punishing Gryffindors for the smallest things. Malfoy and his friends bullied other students, but Snape never stopped them. In Order of the Phoenix, he ignored how they helped Umbridge make life harder for everyone. He also took points from Gryffindor unfairly, while giving extra points to Slytherin. Instead of being fair, Snape cared more about helping his own house win. These are the serious actions that hurt people emotionally, physically, or even led to bigger consequences. Publicly humiliating Harry. It's no secret that Snape hated Harry, but the way he treated him was far from professional. Calling him a failure, insulting his father, and constantly targeting him in class wasn't just strict teaching, it was personal. And in The Half-Blood Prince, when Draco was injured by Harry's Sectum Sempra curse, Snape punished him severely. Now, Harry did use a dangerous spell, but Snape didn't even try to understand the situation. He saw an opportunity and took it, delivering the prophecy that led to the deaths of James and Lily Potter. This is one of Snape's biggest sins. When he was a Death Eater, he overheard part of Trelawney's prophecy and immediately told Voldemort, which set everything in motion. Snape didn't realize the prophecy was about Lily at the time, but his actions still led to her death. And regardless of his regret, the damage done was irreversible. Trying to get Remus Lupin fired. Snape hated Lupin just because of his past friendship with James Potter, and he actively tried to expose him as a werewolf by telling Slytherin students to turn to page 394, where werewolves were covered. Later, after the events at the Shrieking Shack, Snape snitched on Lupin to the Ministry of Magic, forcing him to resign. Lupin was one of the best defense against the dark arts teachers, and Snape got him fired out of pure spite. Trying to sabotage Harry in occlumency lessons. Dumbledore assigned Snape to teach Harry occlumency, a way to block Voldemort from entering his mind. But instead of actually helping, Snape made the lessons unbearable. He didn't explain anything properly, humiliated Harry during each session, and mocked him for not being able to control his emotions. When Harry accidentally accessed Snape's childhood memories, Snape lost his temper and quit the lessons altogether, leaving Harry vulnerable to Voldemort's influence. Standing by while Voldemort killed Charity Burbage. In the opening scene, Voldemort murders Charity Burbage, the Muggle Studies professor at Hogwarts. She was pleading for her life while tied up in the air. What does Snape do? Absolutely nothing. He just sits there watching as Voldemort kills her and then feeds her body to Nagini. Snape could have spoken up or at least shown some remorse, but instead, he remained stone-faced while an innocent woman was brutally executed right in front of him. These are the worst things Snape ever did, the moments where he acted in a way that was either morally unforgivable or had serious consequences. Becoming a Death Eater and participating in dark activities. We don't know everything Snape did before switching sides, but being a Death Eater means he was involved in some pretty dark stuff. He supported Voldemort, and it wasn't until Lily's life was in danger that he had a change of heart. allowing Hogwarts students to suffer under the Carrows. During Deathly Hallows, when Hogwarts was under Voldemort's rule, Snape was headmaster. While he did secretly protect some students, he still let the Carrows torture and abuse them right under his nose. He could have done more to stop it, but he didn't. Snape's sin bar is filling up fast. His actions caused real harm, and while some were just personal grudges, others had deadly consequences, bringing his sinfulness points to a total of 465. That is more than his heroism points. Excuse me? But the big question is, does he deserve to be judged only by his sins? Or did he do enough to redeem himself? Let's talk about that next. Up until now, we've seen both sides, Snape's heroic acts and his sins. It's clear he wasn't a perfect hero, but he also wasn't a complete villain. That brings us to the real question. Did Snape truly redeem himself? It's one thing to regret your mistakes, but did Snape actually try to make things right? That's what we need to figure out. There were some moments where Snape showed remorse or regret, but didn't necessarily change his behavior. Apologizing to Dumbledore for causing Lily's death. When Snape realized his mistake, he went to Dumbledore and begged him to protect Lily. This was the first sign that he felt genuine regret, plus 10 points. Keeping his love for Lily a secret. He never bragged about it, never tried to use it to gain sympathy. He just quietly carried that pain for the rest of his life, plus 10 points. These events show that Snape didn't just feel bad, he actively worked behind the scenes to fix things. Secretly protecting Harry despite hating him. Snape hated Harry because he looked like James, but he still protected him every chance he got. He did it because of Lily's memory, but still, he did it. Plus 20 points. Warning Dumbledore about Voldemort's return. Snape made sure the Order was ready for war before Voldemort even came back officially. If he had stayed loyal to Voldemort, things could have been way worse. Plus 20 points. This is where Snape truly proved his loyalty to the greater good, risking everything to defeat Voldemort. He spent years as a double agent, lying to Voldemort's face, knowing that if he slipped up even once, he was dead. Plus 50 points. Choosing to die rather than run away. Snape could have saved himself, but he stayed in Voldemort's inner circle until the very end. He knew Voldemort would kill him once he was no longer useful, but he still stayed. That's not just loyalty, that's sacrifice. 50 points. Snape's redemption points come to a total of 210. This means he didn't just regret his actions, he spent years suffering, fighting, and sacrificing himself to fix them. Now that we've put everything together, we've gone through his heroism, his sins, and his redemption. It's time for the final verdict. We finally get to answer the big question. Is Severus Snape going to heaven, or is he doomed to hell? Let's do the final calculations. Heroism, points, 365. Sinfulness points, 465. Redemption points, 210. Now let's do the math. Heroism plus redemption gives us 365 plus 210, which equals 575 points. Sinfulness stands at 465 points. So when we compare them, 575 is greater than 465, and that means Snape is going to heaven. Before anyone gets mad, let's talk about why this makes sense. He did more good than harm. His sins were bad, but his heroic and redemptive actions far outweighed them. He spent years fixing his mistakes. Snape didn't just feel bad about what he did, he spent his entire life trying to make things right. He sacrificed everything for the greater good. He didn't just take risks, he gave up his safety, his reputation, and even his life to defeat Voldemort. So yeah, he was cruel, he was bitter, and he made terrible choices. But in the end, he chose the right side and never looked back. That's why I believe Snape deserves heaven.
After all this time. Always.
But hey, that's just my verdict. Do you agree? Should Snape really go to heaven? Or do you think his sins were too much? Who should be put to the test next? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more epic judgments.